This is the general form of a nested for loop in MATLAB, where we have the outer loop, and somewhere inside of the action we have an inner loop. So we might have some statements before, we might have some statements after, but somewhere inside of the outer loop we have the inner loop. So we have two separate loop variables. In our outer loop, our first loop variable 1, goes through a range of values. We'll call that range 1, which is represented by a vector. And then in our inner loop, our second loop variable goes through another range of values that we'll call range 2. So for every value of the first loop variable, the outer loop variable, we're going to execute the entire action, which means the inner loop is going to go through all of its values. So loop variable 2 goes through all of the values in range 2. And then when we execute the action of the outer loop again, once again, the inner loop variable is going to go through all of its values as it iterates through to do the action 2, the number of times specified by the vector in range 2. So here's an example of printing a little box of stars. So we have our outer loop where I goes from 1 to 5, and what we're doing is we're printing rows of stars. So we're going to end up printing here 5 different rows of stars. So the way it works is that when I has the value 1, J is going to go through all of its values, 1, 2, 3. So J, let's make that look more like a J. J starts out at 1, and the action is to print a single star, so we print a single star. Then J gets the value 2, and once again we print a single star. Then J gets the value 3, and once again we print a single star. So now the inner loop, J has gone through all of its values, 1, 2, 3, and each time the action was to print a single star. And then we print one new line character, so that's going to move the cursor down to the next line. So for each of the 5 times we execute the outer loop, we're going to print 1, 2, 3 stars across on a line and then move the cursor down. So we end up printing 5 rows in which each row has 3 stars, and then we move the cursor down after each one. Here's a variation on the inner loop where, again, we're going to repeat 5 times. So the outer loop is going to repeat 5 times, and what we're doing is printing rows. So we're going to print 5 different rows altogether. But in this case, instead of going from 1 to 3, J is going to go from 1 to I. So when I has the value 1, we're printing 1 star. When I has the value 2, we're printing 2 stars. When I has the value 3, we're printing 3 stars. And then we're printing 4 stars. And finally, we're printing 5 stars. So each time J is going to go from 1 to I, we're going to print a single star. And then at the end of each row, we're going to print in the new line, which moves us down to the next line in the output. So the variation here is that the inner loop variable iterates from 1 to I. Here's yet another variation in which we're printing the value of the outer loop variable and a colon, and then printing the stars that go from 1 to I. So in this case, again, the outer loop is going to go from 1 to 5, so we're repeating 5 times. And what we're printing on each row is, first of all, the value of I, and then a colon. So the first time we're printing 1 colon. And then we have the inner loop where J goes from 1 to I to print stars. So in this case, when I is 1, we're going to print a single star. And then at the end of each row, we're going to print the new line character. So we're printing the value of I stars, and then the new line. So when I is 2, we're printing the value of I, which is 2 stars, and the new line. When I is 3, we're printing 3 and 3 stars. When I is 4, we're printing 4 and 4 stars. And finally, when I is 5, we're printing 5 and 5 stars and then moving the cursor down. So if we print something after that, it'll go on the next line. And here's a nested for loop example in which we're using both variables in the action. And what we're doing is we're printing a multiplication table. So again, we're printing a table. So the outer loop is going to tell us how many rows we're printing. In this case, we're printing 1, 2, 3 rows. In the inner loop, J is going to go from 1 to 4, and what we're doing is printing the value of I times J, using a field width of 5 so that the numbers are lined up. Okay, so when I has the value 1, we're printing 1 times, and then the values of j that'll iterate from 1 to 4. So 1 times 1, 1 times 2, 1 times 3, 1 times 4. We're printing those 4 values, and then printing the new line character at the end to move the cursor down to the next line. And then when j has the value 2, we're printing 2 times 1, 2 times 2, 2 times 3, 2 times 4, and then printing the new line character. And then when I has the value 3, we're printing 3 times 1, 3 times 2, 3 times 3, and 3 times 4, and the new line character, which moves us down. So we're printing a little 3 by 4 table, which is a multiplication table.